Notice, both religion and science struggle with this, and this is what we're going to talk about. I've pointed out that atheists rightly indict the Christian community and religion writ large for not being very intellectually honest. But it turns out that the scientific community suffers from the exact same problem. And so we're going to pick at their web of beliefs as well and see how much of it we actually can successfully unravel. So the human condition, I'm going to say, it's really just the human condition that we struggle with this. And so what should be driving us perpetually is the collection and assessment of evidence. But what is evidence? Evidence can mean many things, depending on the context. It's often the case that people think of evidence in terms of, like, the testimony of authorities and witnesses. You know, somebody was there, they told you something happened. You're fine with that. You don't feel the need to go witness the event yourself. You just accept the testimony of somebody else, and you take that testimony as evidence. And we do this in courts of law all the time. Our own experiences, I mean, we can testify, right, of things that we have seen, and we report constantly on evidences that emerge just from our own experiences. You know, Anne tells me that she has a pain in her hand, her wrist. I don't feel the need to go out and, you know, get some second, third, fourth opinion on that. She reports it. It's her experience. I accept it as a reliable testimony. We accept this kind of evidence all the time. There are things we know just rationally. We know 1 + 1 = 2, for example. We know how the principle of addition works. If you go into a room and you count 32 chairs, and later somebody comes into that same room and they count 33 chairs, and later somebody comes into that room and they count 31 chairs. Here's what you don't do. Here's what none of the three of you do. Wow, the principle of addition is not what I was taught when I was growing up. Sometimes 31 + 1 = 32, but sometimes it equals 33. And sometimes 31 + 1 = 31. I don't understand it. We'll have to do some scientific research and figure out how this actually works. Right? No one thinks that. You don't question the principle of addition. You know just rationally how the principle of addition works, and it's not a matter of individual experiences where you assess whether the principle of addition works in a certain way. In fact, you'll question your experiences before you'll question the rationality, that core bedrock rationality, the principle of addition. I'm going to make that point again because this is going to become really important as we go forward. You will question your experience. You will question the testimony of expert witnesses about what they experienced before you will question the principle of addition. Is everyone with me on that? Okay. For religious people, we're going to accept revelation, right, as reliable evidence. We're going to take, for example, the Bible. Muslims will take the Quran. We take this as reliable testimony, if you will. And we think we're getting revelations from God. And here, what revelation is distinguished from other forms of evidence in that revelation is substantive claims about the world that you can't get just from the world. Right? Revelation is telling you things about the way the world works, but they are things that you don't derive just from your own experience or from rationality, like the principle of addition, for example. Right? You're learning things about the way the world works, but these are things you can get only from revelation. I'll give you some examples as we go along. Our web of beliefs themselves, those webs, actually are evidence. Because as we've assembled a puzzle picture together in our minds about a certain subject, we can look at that puzzle picture and say, I see the picture. There's a coherency to that. It makes sense. And the very fact that you have an assembled, coherent puzzle picture is itself evidence. You're much less likely to take a piece as being true if you can find no way to integrate it into your puzzle picture. Isn't that right? That web of beliefs itself has a certain resistance to having something forced in on it that doesn't fit. And so we take that web of beliefs as itself a type of evidence. Now notice something very important here. Evidence is what provides the content of the propositions that we use when we're making inferences. So we've talked about form and content of inferences. The form, we're pretty solid on at this point. The content are those assertions that we make, those positive claims that we assert, and those are what we believe to be the case. So what we believe is what forms the content of those inferences that we make going forward. But it turns out that all these different kinds of evidence that we're talking about all can be boiled down to 3 types, and then ultimately I'm going to show you they actually boil down to only 2 types. We really only assess 2 types of evidence. Rational evidence. We've just talked about an example of that. We grasp rational evidence by deductive reasoning alone. The world doesn't cause us to question what we know rationally. As I said, if counts of a number of chairs in a room come apart, what we don't question is the principle of addition. We'll question that somebody counted accurately. We'll question whether somebody brought in or took out a chair. But what we don't question is that fundamentally rational principle. We take that as evidence. It's bedrock. The world works a certain way. And one of the ways it works is according to the principle of addition. Well, empirical evidence. I'm going to start trotting out some terms that you're going to have to learn. Empirical, grasped by the senses. And most of the evidence that we accept, most of the content of our belief systems concerns empirical evidence. Things we believe because we've experienced them. And then revelation. Things we believe because they've been revealed to us, and we know that the truth of those claims can't be just derived from the world, so to speak. You guys have any ideas, any examples of a claim of revelation that doesn't emerge, cannot in principle emerge, just from the way the world empirically is? Something you know from the Bible that you're not going to find any empirical world evidence for. Yes? Okay, Jesus is coming back again. Yeah, what about the world experience is going to tell you that? Any other examples? Tracy? God can heal, okay? In fact, people that are pure empiricists would say, not only does the world not tell you that, but all the evidence we have asserts that God has nothing to do with the process, right? So you believe something on the basis of revelation alone that in fact it could be asserted isn't even sustained by what we know from the empirical world, right? So we do accept examples, we do have examples of revelation propositional content that we don't get from just the world. And that's the whole point of revelation, right? Is that God tells us things that he knows we can't derive just from our experiences in the world or rationality alone. The distinction between these types of evidence is going to emerge strictly from what role sensory experience plays. And we're going to find that the great divide is between evidences that you can gain completely apart from sensory experience and evidences that you gain that must necessarily emerge from sensory experience. So this is the great divide between types of evidence. And we're going to learn a little Latin today. So there are 2 terms, a priori and a posteriori. Now, fortunately for you, you only have to remember one of them, because a posteriori is equivalent to empirical. And we've already talked about empirical, and that's a word that you understand and you're comfortable with. Well, a priori. Notice that in the Latin, you have prior and post. And that's the big clue as to how these both relate to sensory experience. A priori means prior to experience. A posteriori means post-experience or after experience. Makes sense, right? But there's something to understand here, and that is we don't mean in time. Here's the counterintuitive part about this distinction. It has to do with the logical relation that experience has to your knowledge. It doesn't have to do with the temporal relation that your experience has to do with the knowledge. For example, if you learned the Pythagorean theorem in school, you might say, well, I learned the Pythagorean theorem after I was taught, from hearing, from seeing. Sensory experience taught me the Pythagorean theorem, so I learned the Pythagorean theorem after experience. But the Pythagorean theorem is actually an example of an a priori knowledge, because the only way you can learn about the Pythagorean theorem is because the Pythagorean theorem has been proved. You're learning about it afterward via experience, but your experience is not what makes the Pythagorean theorem true. The truth of the Pythagorean theorem is independent of experience. It's logically independent of experience. Time has nothing to do with the matter here. So a priori really means logically prior to experience, or in other words, independent of experience. And a posteriori doesn't mean following experience in time, it means logically dependent upon experience. You could not in principle know it without experience. Okay, any questions about this? This is an interesting divide, especially if you've been hit upside the head by this for the first time. Any questions about this? Does this make sense initially? Okay, I'm seeing enough nodding. I'm going to go on. So we've talked about this. A posteriori means logically dependent upon experience. And by experience, we mean both inner and outer sense. We have the experience of the outside world via the 5 traditional senses, right? But what about inner sense? What could that mean? You are aware of your own pains, for example. Pain is not an experience of the outer world, right? It's a feeling, but it's entirely yours. It's entirely inner. There's nothing objective about a pain. Okay, what about the sense of the passage of time? This came before that. We order events in our own mind in time, and we're aware of the passage of time. What about our ordering of our own thoughts? I thought this before I thought that. We're experiencing our own selves as an object of experience. Isn't that odd? The interesting part of being self-aware is that we get to experience ourselves as objects of experience. And I would say that the huge divide between the animal kingdom and the human realm is the variety, depth, and even the existence of the fact that we experience ourselves as objects of experience. We're self-aware in a very robust sense. And so part of our experience of reality is our experience of ourselves as internal experience. So we have inner and outer sense. We may be dead again, Kaylee. It's about that time. For some reason, I don't know what it is, it seems almost a timed game. Let's see, so we are there. Okay, yes. So the great divide is between a priori and empirical relations to gaining knowledge. So now I'm going to help you with some pretty graphics. Now I warn you, these are going to get more and more complicated. But that's just what you would expect, right? Okay, so we have all that can be known. There's just this huge realm of all the things that we could, in principle, come to know. And a subset of those things we come to know through reason alone. The principle of addition, the Pythagorean theorem, Statements like, I know for certain that a bachelor is unmarried. I know for certain that a triangle has 3 sides. I'm 100% positive about that. It cannot be doubted. I know it by reason alone. I don't need to go interview bachelors. Are you a bachelor? Yep. Are you married? Nope. 1 for 1. Are you a bachelor? Yep. Are you married? Nope. 2 for 2. Hey, that is not how we do that. We don't get that by experience. Okay? That is by definition. Kant would call it analytic. Just true by definition, false by contradiction. It's analytically true. Well, we get a lot of knowledge by sensation, sensory experience. Ice is cold. Fire is hot. I have a pain in my finger. These are all things we know, but we know them by sensation, right? Either inner or outer sense. Now, empiricists would say rationalism isn't really telling us about the world. And this is a really crucial point. They would say rationalism is empty. It tells us only about, as Hume would put it, relations of ideas. Define bachelor, and now you know something by definition. Doesn't tell you anything about whether there are any bachelors. That doesn't tell you anything about marriage. Doesn't tell you anything about anything. It tells you about a relations of ideas. So Hume would say, rationalism is knowledge, but it's not knowledge about the world. You can't do metaphysics with rationalism. Metaphysics is about the fabric of the world, the furniture of the universe, what really is. And Hume would say, the reason I'm an empiricist is because rationalism is empty. It's formal. It's relations of ideas. There's no real-world content in it. So rationalism is empty. Empiricism becomes writ large, and if you're an empiricist, that circle goes out to extend to the whole square, right? It just becomes all that can be known empirically. Okay? Any questions thus far? Is this making sense? You following along with me? Any questions? Okay, good. Revelation. We know things by revelation. There will be a resurrection. How do I get that from any real-world experience or any rational truths? No, if I believe that's true, I believe it on the basis of revelation, not on the basis of anything I could derive in any other way. God will judge, and he will reward and punish. There will be a judgment. God is love. Can I really get that from the world? I mean, if there's any single thing that causes people to question the existence of God, it's the problem of evil. You don't get from the world, you don't get that God is love. You have to believe that God is love almost in spite of what you get from the world. Isn't that interesting? All right, well, let's put these together. I told you these diagrams are going to get more and more complicated, so here we go. Notice that we have a circle called reason, and notice it says that reason has 2 roles. Here's why. Not only can I think of things and know truths by reason alone, but reason also acts as the adjudicator or referee of all other attempts at giving me knowledge. Okay? If you come to me and as testimony and you say, I witnessed an accident, and I say, oh, okay, tell me about the accident. I already know now this is going to be empirical knowledge, right? This isn't going to be in that great big top circle. It's going to be in that lower left circle. You sensed it, and you're telling me is me sensing it indirectly. I'm going to derive this from sensory experience alone. This is empirical. It's a posteriori. So I already know that I'm not deriving this knowledge out of that top circle. But reason plays another role. Let's say that you tell me, the accident I saw, it was the craziest thing ever. This guy's just walking down the street, he's in the crosswalk, he has the walk symbol, everything is golden, and suddenly a spherical cube comes swooping in from the right and just takes him out. A spherical cube! I've never seen anything like it. It just nailed him and knocked him on his butt, and he went to the hospital. I've never seen such damage. Spherical cubes are tough, and they're fast. Do I suddenly buy your account? No. Why? Because it violates reason. Reason acts as an adjudicator of claims in the other spheres. Are you seeing the point here? Not only do I get knowledge from reason, but reason serves another role, and that is reason is the referee of other knowledge claims and says, that one doesn't get to fly. I don't think that one's true. But as long as something is consistent with reason, we could accept it as being true. If you instead said, the guy, put the whole thing together again, he's walking through the crosswalk, everything's golden, and all of a sudden a car comes swooping through against the red light and just takes him out. I'm going to immediately go, wow, terrible, wow. I'm not going to reject that on the face of it because it coheres with reason. So reason has two roles. One is to produce the content of some knowledge, and the other is to referee all knowledge claims. Okay? So we have this overlap, and you'll see these colors, and you'll notice that we have a color that is kind of a lighter green in the center, and we have a red that's below it. Okay? And we're going to pay attention to those different overlaps because we're going to find that we assess evidence, we assess knowledge on the basis of how these overlaps work. So notice that true propositional knowledge can only occur in that intersection that occurs in that upper circle. And why is that? Well, because only knowledge that is within the realm of reason as adjudicator can possibly be true.